You are standing in a supermarket cereal aisle. It is a Tuesday. There are 47 types of granola in front of you, and you have been staring at them for 90 seconds, and you genuinely cannot decide, and a part of your brain is quietly panicking as if this decision matters. It does not matter. Nothing about oat clusters matters. But the panic is real, and the panic is old, and the panic was installed in your skull roughly 2 million years before granola existed. Here is the uncomfortable thing about that panic. You did not choose it. You think you're standing there weighing your options like a rational adult. You are not. A survival circuit that evolved on the African savanna is running the exact same threat assessment routine it would have run if those cereal boxes were a patch of unfamiliar berries that might kill you. Your brain does not know the difference. It has never known the difference. And that gap between what your brain thinks it's protecting you from and what is actually in front of you is the reason you act the way you do about almost everything. So here is the part they leave out of every self-help book you have ever ignored. Most of your personality is not personality. A huge amount of what you call just the way I am is a set of ancient behavioral programs running on hardware that has not meaningfully updated since the Pleistocene. And once you can see the programs, you cannot unsee them. Here is exactly what I'm going to walk you through. First, the reason you check your phone the instant you feel bored, and why that specific itch is the same circuit that kept your ancestors alive by making them scan the tree line every few seconds. Second, why you care so violently about what strangers think of you, even strangers you will never see again, and how a group of about 150 people set the size of your entire social anxiety. Third, why sugar and salt and fat hijack you the way they do, and the specific reason your willpower is not actually the problem. Fourth, why you snap into fight or flight over an email, a traffic merge, or a passive-aggressive text when nothing is threatening your body at all. And fifth, the single strangest one, the reason you feel like a coherent you making decisions in real time when the evidence suggests the deciding already happened and your conscious mind just gets a memo after the fact. That last one genuinely bothers people, so I saved it for the end. I make videos about the origins of human behavior, specifically the boring, universal stuff every single person does and never questions, the habits so normal they've become invisible, and I go back and find the moment we started. So none of what follows is my opinion about how you should live. It's just the receipts on why the machine runs the way it runs. Let me tell you about a man named Phineas Gage, because his skull is the cleanest proof we have that you are a physical object that can be edited. In 1848, Gage was a railroad foreman in Vermont, 25 years old, by every account responsible, polite, well-liked, the kind of guy you'd trust with a crew. On September 13th, he was packing explosive powder into a hole with a 3-foot-long iron tamping rod. The powder ignited early. The rod, 13 pounds of it, an inch and a quarter thick, shot up through his left cheek, behind his left eye, through the front of his brain, and out the top of his skull, landing about 80 feet away. He did not die. That's the first shock. He sat up within minutes, spoke, walked to a cart. Within 2 months, the wound had physically healed. By the numbers, Phineas Gage recovered. Except the man who recovered was not the man who got hurt. The polite, reliable foreman was gone. In his place was someone impulsive, profane, unable to hold a plan, described by the people who knew him with a sentence that haunts neuroscience to this day. He was no longer Gage. His friends meant it literally. Same body, same memories, same voice. Different person. Because the iron rod had destroyed a specific region of his frontal lobe, and that region, it turns out, was holding a big chunk of what everyone thought of as his character. The reason I'm opening with Gage is not that he's a medical curiosity. It's that he's the proof of concept for the entire rest of this video. His self was not a soul hovering above the machinery. It was the machinery. Damage a specific circuit, and the person changes. which means the reverse is also true. When your circuits are intact and running their ancient programs, those programs are, functionally, you. And an estimated 8 billion people are walking around right now, absolutely certain they're in charge, running software that was written for a world that no longer exists. So let's talk about how that software actually works, because the mechanism is simpler and weirder than you'd think. Your brain did not evolve to make you happy or accurate or rational. It evolved to make copies of itself. That is the entire design goal, the only thing natural selection ever optimized for. Behaviors that got your ancestors' genes into the next generation. Happiness, truth, calm, contentment. Those were only ever useful when they served that one goal, and thrown out the second they didn't. Think about what that means for something like anxiety. Picture two of your ancestors on the savannah, a couple 100,000 years ago. There's a rustle in the tall grass. The first ancestor is chill, relaxed, assumes it's the wind. The second ancestor assumes it's a lion and bolts. Now, 9 times out of 10, it really is the wind, and the anxious one looks like a paranoid idiot. But on the 10th time, it's a lion, and the chill ancestor gets eaten and removed from the gene pool forever, while the anxious one lives to have anxious children. Run that math across a few 100,000 generations, and you get us. We are, every one of us, the descendants of the nervous ones. The calm ones are not our ancestors. The calm ones are lunch. That's the whole engine. Evolution doesn't care that you're miserable on a Sunday night, dreading a Monday that holds no lions. It only cares that the circuit which produces that dread once kept somebody alive. The circuit fires now because it fired then, and it fired then because the people it didn't fire in are dead. Here's the part almost no one connects. This means most of your worst feelings are not malfunctions. They are the system working perfectly, just aimed at a world that stopped existing about 12,000 years ago, which in evolutionary time is roughly 5 minutes ago. The savannah is still running in your skull. The lions just got replaced by unread emails. Let me show you what that looks like in 3 specific people, because you'll recognize at least one of them as yourself. Take Marcus, 31, works in marketing, and every 11 minutes, on average, he picks up his phone without deciding to. He'll be mid-sentence in a conversation, and his hand is already reaching. He calls it a bad habit. He's tried the apps that lock him out. What Marcus is actually experiencing is a hunting circuit. For 2 million years, the humans who survived were the ones who compulsively scanned the environment for new information. A change in the tree line, a fresh track, a shift in the wind. Because in a world of scarcity, new information was food, safety, or death. Novelty triggered a hit of dopamine, which is not a pleasure chemical. That's the myth. It's a seeking chemical, the thing that makes you want to check. Your phone is a slot machine that pays out in exactly that neurotransmitter. Marcus isn't weak. Marcus is a superb prehistoric forager who has been handed an infinite bush of berries that never runs out, and his brain, correctly, by its own ancient logic, refuses to walk away from an infinite food source. That's the first thing nobody tells you about your screen time. You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to not missing something, and that circuit saved your ancestors' lives every single day. Now take Aisha, 26, and the thing that keeps her up at night is a slightly awkward thing she said at a dinner 4 days ago. She replays it. She's certain everyone at that table thinks less of her now. Rationally, she knows they've all forgotten it. She cannot make the feeling stop. Aisha is running the reputation circuit, and to understand it, you have to understand a number. About 150. That's Dunbar's number, the rough cap on how many people a human can maintain real social relationships with. And it happens to line up with the size of the groups our ancestors actually lived in for hundreds of thousands of years. In a group of 150, your reputation was not vanity. It was survival infrastructure. Get branded as selfish, dishonest, or unreliable, and the group could exile you. And exile, alone, on the savannah, was a death sentence. So evolution wired social rejection to hurt using the literal same brain regions as physical pain. That is not a metaphor. Being left out lights up the same circuitry as a broken bone. Because for your ancestors, being left out was a slower version of exactly that. Aisha's brain treats a dinner party misstep as a threat to her physical survival, because for 2,000 centuries, it was. Then there's Robert, 62, and he cannot walk past a bowl of chips without emptying it, and he hates himself for it because he should have more self-control. Robert's problem is that his tongue is running 18th century calibration in a 21st century world. Sugar, salt, and fat were, for almost all of human history, rare and precious. A hit of ripe fruit, a lucky find of honey, the fat of a large animal. These were jackpots that might not come again for weeks. So brains that screamed, "Eat all of it now," outsurvived brains that shrugged. There was no failure mode for overeating sugar because you could never find enough of it to overeat. That off switch was never built because it never needed to be. Now Robert lives surrounded by engineered food, designed by people whose entire job is to hit those ancient reward buttons harder than any berry ever could. His willpower is not the problem. You cannot will your way out of a circuit that was specifically not given a stopping mechanism. Robert isn't greedy. Robert is a perfectly optimized Stone Age eater trapped in a candy store that never closes. Marcus, Aisha, and Robert think they have 3 different personal failings. They have one shared inheritance. And so do you. So here is exactly what to do about it in order, because seeing the machine is only step 1. Step 1, actually, is naming the circuit in the moment. When you feel the pull, the itch to check the phone, the sting of imagined judgment, the pull toward the chips, the thing that shifts it is silently labeling it. That's the foraging circuit. That's the reputation circuit. This sounds absurdly simple. It works because naming it reroutes the reaction through your frontal lobe, the newest part of the brain, the gauge part, and puts a half-second gap between the ancient impulse and your response. That half-second is where all of your actual freedom lives. Everything you'd call self-control is really just widening that gap. Second, engineer your environment instead of fighting your brain, because your brain will win every single time in a fair fight. This is the one people resist because it feels like cheating. It's not cheating. It's the only thing that reliably works. Robert cannot out-willpower a bowl of chips, but Robert can absolutely not put the bowl on the counter. Marcus cannot out-discipline the infinite berry bush, but he can leave the phone in another room. You are not weak for needing this. You are correctly diagnosing that the ancient circuit is stronger than the conscious you and routing around it, which is the smartest possible move. Third, deliberately create scarcity. Because your reward system was calibrated for a world where good things were rare, and it breaks when good things are constant. The dopamine hit from your phone, from sugar, from a like, gets weaker the more constantly you get it. So the fix is to reintroduce the gaps your ancestors had for free. Make the good thing occasional again. The pleasure doesn't come from the thing, it comes from the thing arriving after a wait. Remove the weight and you've removed the pleasure and kept only the compulsion. Fourth, and this one is for the reputation circuit specifically, consciously separate this group's opinion from survival. When Aisha feels the exile panic over a dinner comment, the intervention is to name the actual stakes. Her tribe is not 150 people who control her access to food and shelter. She has, in reality, thousands of possible social groups. And losing any one of them is survivable in a way it simply was not for our ancestors. The panic is real, but the math it's based on expired 10,000 years ago. Reminding yourself of the true modern odds doesn't delete the feeling, but it demotes it from emergency to weather. And fifth, the general one that underwrites all the others. Assume your first reaction is the old software, and your second thought is you. The impulse is the inheritance. The pause after it is where the actual person shows up. You will never delete the ancient reactions. They're built into the hardware, but you get to decide, in that gap, whether to obey them. Now for the advanced move. the one that even most people who study this stuff find genuinely disturbing. And it goes deeper than everything I've said so far. I've been telling you that ancient circuits drive your behavior, and your conscious self can, with effort, override them. But there's a set of experiments that questions whether your conscious self is even the one doing the overriding, or whether it's just narrating decisions that were already made. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet wired people up and asked them to do something trivial, flick their wrist, whenever they felt like it, and to note the exact moment they consciously decided to move. He measured three things: the muscle moving, the conscious decision, and a specific electrical buildup in the brain called the readiness potential. Common sense says the order should be: you decide, then your brain acts, then the muscle moves. That's not what he found. The readiness potential, the brain gearing up to move, appeared a fraction of a second before people reported consciously deciding. The brain had already started the action before the you that supposedly chose it knew about the choice. Later experiments using brain scans pushed that gap out to several seconds in some cases, long enough for researchers to predict a decision before the subject felt they'd made it. Now, there's real debate about what this means, and I want to be honest that scientists genuinely disagree about the interpretation. Some argue the conscious mind still holds a veto, that it can't start the action but it can cancel it, which puts the you back in the driver's seat as a kind of editor rather than an author. But the unsettling core survives all the debates. At least sometimes, the feeling of having freely chosen arrives after the choosing has already begun. Your sense of being the author may be, in part, a story your brain assembles a beat late so that the machinery feels like a self. Which connects straight back to Phineas Gage. If damaging a circuit can change the person, and if the decisions can start before the person feels them, then the you that's been watching this whole video might be less the pilot and more the flight recorder, receiving the announcement that a decision has been made and experiencing that announcement as I decided. That's the part they leave out, and if it makes you a little uncomfortable, good. It should. Because here's where all of it lands. None of this means you're a puppet with no say. The frontal lobe is real, the pause is real, the veto might be real, and the fact that you can even understand these circuits is itself a kind of freedom no other animal has. A lion cannot notice its own hunting instinct and decide to route around it. You can. That's the actual upgrade. You will never stop being a Pleistocene creature in a modern world, checking the tree line, guarding your reputation, hunting for sugar that never runs out. But you are the first Pleistocene creature that can see the circuits running, name them, and open up that half-second gap where something like a real choice can happen. Your first reaction was written 2 million years ago. What you do in the second after it is the only part that was ever actually yours. So the next time you're frozen in front of 47 kinds of granola, quietly panicking over oats, you'll know exactly which ancestor is standing there with you, scanning the grass for a lion that isn't coming. And you'll get to decide whether to listen. If figuring out why the machine runs the way it runs is the kind of thing you'd happily lose 20 minutes to, subscribe, because that's the entire channel. And if any one of these three people was a little too obviously you, hit like so the algorithm shows it to the person you're about to send it to.